The observation room of the L5 orbital monitoring station was bathed in the usual dim light of the night shift when the Level 3 alarm began to pulse. Dr. Maya Miller looked up from the climate simulations she had been reviewing for 4 hours and felt her stomach tighten. In 15 years of monitoring deep space, she had never heard that sound. The main panel lit up automatically, cascading data about gravitational anomalies detected at the heliopause, the invisible boundary where solar wind meets interstellar space. Maya moved to the console, her fingers dancing over holographic controls as she tried to isolate the source of the disturbance. What she saw made her heart race. 203 signals of significant mass were crossing the Oort cloud in perfect military formation. They weren't asteroids, they weren't comets. The electromagnetic radiation readings were inconsistent with any known natural phenomenon. Maya zoomed in on the spectral image and felt her hands shake. The thermal signatures were consistent with active propulsion systems, and the geometry of the structures was definitely artificial. Ships. 203 alien spacecraft on a direct course for Earth. With trembling fingers, Maya triggered Protocol Sigma, a communication sequence that existed only in theory, created decades ago by scientists who imagined this moment as a fun academic exercise. No one ever actually expected to use it. The encrypted signal traveled through global communication satellites, simultaneously hitting the Pentagon, the Kremlin, Beijing, Brussels, and dozens of other command centers around the world. Within minutes, red phones rang in the dark bedrooms of world leaders. The impossible had become real. 3 billion miles away, in the climate-controlled comfort of the flagship Hammer of Order, Grand Admiral Korthax watched the small blue sphere through the panoramic viewport of his command post. His 4 vertical pupils contracted in aesthetic appreciation. The planet was genuinely beautiful, with its shimmering oceans and green continents. A pity its inhabitants were so primitive. Korthax belonged to the Vexari race, conquerors who ruled 200 star systems across the galaxy. His scaly skin reflected the light of distant stars as he crossed his 3 pairs of arms in satisfaction. This would be his 90th conquest, a nice round number to end his career before retirement. The intelligence officer, a younger Vexarii named Thrain, approached with the updated report on the target planet. Korthax accepted the data device and scanned the information with only moderate interest. Native species calling themselves humans. Bipeds without natural armor, claws, or regenerative capabilities. Average lifespan of only 80 planetary revolutions. Technology based on chemical combustion and primitive nuclear fission. Society fragmented into 195 distinct political entities with a documented history of constant internal conflict. Korthax made a sound that could be interpreted as a condescending laugh. The humans seemed almost pathetic in their fragility. Creatures that hadn't even mastered nuclear fusion yet, let alone warp drives or gravitational manipulation, and that ridiculous political division. Fragmented civilizations always fell the easiest. According to the Empire, he needed to give notice of the intent to conquer. He pondered for a moment, then activated the long-range communication system. It was almost a formality, but the rules were clear, even for inferior species. They should have the chance to surrender. At the United Nations headquarters in New York, the Secretary General called an emergency session of the Security Council. Ambassador Elizabeth Hayes, the U.S. representative and a 40-year veteran of international diplomacy, watched the tense faces around the table. For the first time in decades, there were no disagreements over procedures or hidden agendas. The external threat had done the impossible, uniting old rivals in a common purpose. The alien signal was received simultaneously in every capital in the world. The automatic translation worked perfectly, processing the message into every known Earth language. The voice that boomed from the speakers was deep and coded in absolute authority. Inhabitants of the third planet of this yellow star, I am Grand Admiral Korthax of the Vexari Imperial Fleet. Your world has been selected for integration into the Galactic Empire. You have 20 of your Earth minutes to declare total and unconditional surrender. Your leaders will be preserved as local administrators under Imperial supervision. Resistance will result in orbital pacification and unnecessary loss of primitive lives. The choice is yours. The silence that followed was broken by the Russian ambassador, who let out a bitter laugh and asked in heavily accented English, "Do they really think we're just going to surrender like that?" Ambassador Hayes looked around the table. She saw representatives from China, France, the UK, Brazil, India, all with identical expressions of iron determination. She thought of her daughter, her grandchildren, billions of people she would never meet, but who were counting on her to make the right decision in this impossible moment. She pressed the global transmission button and spoke with a firm, clear voice. Grand Admiral Korthax, this is Ambassador Elizabeth Hayes, speaking on behalf of a unified humanity. We have received your message, and our response is as follows. You have 20 minutes to reverse the course of your ships and leave our solar system. Otherwise, we will interpret your presence as an act of war and respond accordingly. The choice is yours. Aboard the Hammer of Order, Korthax and his crew fell silent for 3 full seconds before exploding into something humans would recognize as laughter. Officer Thrain had to steady himself against a console. He was so amused. "Admiral, they're bluffing," Thrain said between laughs. "Sensors confirm their most advanced technology is orbital communication satellites and a few fission-based nuclear weapons. They have no capacity to threaten us at this distance." Korthax agreed, but something in his veteran instinct bothered him. He reviewed the data on human conflicts again. World wars, weapons of mass destruction, concepts like mutually assured destruction. These primitives had developed the capacity to annihilate their own planet multiple times. What kind of species creates weapons to kill itself on a planetary scale? Korthax muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Thrain didn't hear the remark. He was busy monitoring the countdown timer. 19 minutes and 30 seconds until the surrender deadline. In secret military bases scattered across the globe, systems that existed only as rumors began to activate. Deep facilities under the Rocky Mountains hummed with life. Orbital satellites that looked like civilian telecommunications equipment revealed their true purposes, opening hidden panels to expose batteries of railguns powered by compact fusion reactors that technically shouldn't exist. Humanity had lied, not about everything, but about enough. For decades, while the world seemed divided by ideologies and borders, engineers and scientists from different nations collaborated in secret. Black projects with hidden budgets, experimental technologies that remained in continuous development even after the official end of the Cold War, all based on a single terrifying premise. What if we aren't alone, and what if they are hostile? At the Nevada test site, General Marcus Reeves watched screens showing the status of weapons Congress believed had been decommissioned: particle cannons, high-energy chemical lasers, experimental antimatter torpedoes with enough yield to vaporize a city. He opened a secure channel with his counterparts in Russia, China, and Europe. All confirmed operational readiness. Reeves allowed himself a grim smile. The aliens had underestimated the human capacity for productive paranoia and fear-driven engineering. 15 minutes until the deadline. Korthax watched the timer with growing impatience. No sign of capitulation, no further communication, just absolute radio silence coming from the planetary surface. He briefly considered the possibility that the humans actually intended to fight, but dismissed the idea as absurd. "Sensor officer, report," he ordered. "Detecting a sudden surge in energy emissions across the planet, sir. High thermal readings in multiple locations. They are likely activating their global communication infrastructure." Korthax nodded, probably preparing to announce the surrender on a planetary scale. It would be the sensible procedure. 10 minutes. At the L5 station, Maya Miller watched the final preparations through encrypted data feeds. She thought of her family in Chicago, her colleagues around the world, children who didn't yet know a universe where they weren't alone. A tear rolled down her face, but she wiped it away quickly. There was no time for fear, only for precision. 5 minutes. Korthax straightened in his command chair. It would be almost a disappointment if they surrendered so easily. Part of him hoped for at least some symbolic resistance, something to make this conquest memorable. "Prepare disabling cannons," he ordered. "If they don't respond by the deadline, we will destroy 3 of their largest cities as a demonstration. That usually convinces the stubborn ones." 1 minute, 30 seconds, 10, 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the hammer of order's sensors exploded with alerts. "Objects launched from the planetary surface," the sensor officer screamed. "Count, 4,000, 7,000, 12,000, and increasing. Velocities ranging from Mach 20 to 1/10 the speed of light. Multiple signature types. Unknown composition." Korthax stood up abruptly. Impossible. How could they? The first salvo hit the outermost escort ship in the formation. The Spear-class destroyer didn't even have time to activate full shields before 3 kinetic projectiles tore through it from end to end. The structure fragmented into a flower of superheated metal and vaporized atmosphere. The second destroyer tried to maneuver evasively, but was swallowed by a 50-megaton thermonuclear detonation right in the center of its engineering section. In 15 seconds, humanity had destroyed 8 alien warships. Korthax finally understood his mistake. These weren't defenseless primitives. They were predators who had spent millennia perfecting a single skill: the art of killing. The chaos that broke out on the bridge of the Hammer of Order was something Korthax had never experienced in 89 previous conquests. Alarms blared in dissonant frequencies as tactical holograms showed ships of his fleet being systematically destroyed by weapons that, according to all intelligence reports, shouldn't exist. "Shields to maximum!" Korthax roared, gripping the supports of his command station as the flagship shuddered from kinetic projectile impacts. "Return fire immediately." "Sir, the plasma cannons need 40 more seconds to fully charge," the weapons officer replied, his voice laced with what Korthax recognized as thinly veiled panic. "Point defenses are saturated. There are too many simultaneous projectiles." Korthax watched helplessly as another Dominator-class cruiser exploded in the silence of the vacuum. The humans weren't just firing randomly. Each salvo was coordinated with surgical precision, alternating between high-velocity projectiles to saturate defenses and nuclear warheads to cause maximum damage when shields failed under pressure. It was a tactic he recognized from conflicts against advanced warrior species, not from primitives who had barely left their own planet. In the control room of Cheyenne Mountain, General Reeves watched the battle feeds with grim satisfaction. Each red dot that disappeared from the screens represented a neutralized alien ship. Beside him, ballistics experts and intelligence officers coordinated strikes across 3 continents. "Successful missile saturation in the northern sector," a lieutenant reported. "Orbital railguns confirm the destruction of 2 more targets. Laser platforms are recharging." "Keep the pressure on," Reeves ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup or counterattack in a coordinated way. I want them to feel what it's like to face an adversary that isn't afraid to die fighting." In the space between Mars and Earth, the battle took on epic proportions. What Korthax had imagined as a quick pacification had turned into a fight for survival. His ships, designed for combat against organized fleets with predictable tactical protocols, found themselves lost against a chaotic swarm of missiles, projectiles, and energy beams coming from impossible angles. The humans had placed weapons on absolutely everything orbiting their planet. Communication satellites turned out to be weapon platforms. Scientific space stations opened hatches to launch torpedoes. Even space debris cataloged as orbital junk turned out to be dormant missiles awaiting activation. "Communications officer, open a channel to the planet," Korthax ordered, finally accepting a bitter truth. "We will negotiate terms." Before the officer could respond, a new threat appeared on the sensors. Fusion propulsion signals emerging from the planetary surface. No longer missiles or projectiles, but ships. Small, certainly no larger than interceptor fighters, but in numbers great enough to darken the sensors. 462 space fighter signatures, the sensor officer reported, his voice trembling. "Armed with energy weapons and short-range missiles, estimated time to intercept, 8 minutes. Korthax felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Genuine fear. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were actively attacking, turning what should have been a demonstration of Imperial force into a battle of mutual extermination. Aboard the fighter Phoenix leader, Colonel David Chen adjusted his seatbelt as his interceptor's fusion engine reached maximum speed. Around him, hundreds of other pilots did the same. Veterans recruited from air forces around the world and trained in secret for a scenario they all hoped never to face. "Phoenix squadrons, this is Leader," Chen transmitted over the encrypted tactical channel. "Rules of engagement are active. Priority targets, flagships, and heavy cruisers. Ignore the destroyers. Our orbital platforms are handling them. Show these invaders why humanity conquered its own planet." "Copy that, Leader," replied the voices of dozens of pilots, each charged with adrenaline and determination. Chen watched his fighter's HUD, showing the alien formation disintegrating. The enemy ships were trying to regroup, but every second lost cost them more units. He squeezed the attack controls and felt the familiar weight of acceleration as his fighter dove toward the first target. The combat that followed was both brutal and elegant. The human fighters, smaller and more agile than anything the Vexari had faced, danced among the alien destroyers like angry wasps. Chemical lasers sliced through armor, AI-guided missiles found weak points in shields, and pilots executed maneuvers that would generate lethal G-forces for any species without inertial dampening technology. 3 fighters were destroyed in the first minutes of combat, vaporized by plasma cannons that had finally charged. But for every fighter lost, 2 alien destroyers were neutralized. The math was brutal and clear. The humans were winning through sheer tactical aggression and a willingness to accept losses that would make any other species retreat. At the European Defense Command headquarters in Brussels, cyber warfare specialists launched their own kind of attack. Adaptive algorithms developed to penetrate corporate firewalls were reconfigured to invade alien systems. Surprisingly, it worked. "We have access to their communication protocol," announced an analyst named Sophia Miller, her fingers flying over holographic keyboards. "The encryption is sophisticated but based on standard binary logic. We've managed to inject noise into their transmissions." "Do better," her supervisor replied. "I want complete control of secondary systems. Make those ships fire on each other." Sophia smiled predatorily. "Consider it done." Minutes later, the chaos in the Vexari ranks reached new heights as 3 Hammer-class cruisers opened fire on their own escort ships. The resulting confusion created openings that the human fighters exploited without mercy. Korthax watched his empire of conquest crumble in real time. More than 60 ships destroyed or severely damaged. Communication systems compromised. Tactical formation completely fragmented. And the humans kept pressing, relentless as a swarm of predators sensing blood in the water. Officer Thrain approached Korthax, his normally confident posture now slumped in defeat. "Admiral, we need to retreat. If we stay, the entire fleet will be annihilated." Korthax wanted to disagree, wanted to find a strategy to save the situation, but decades of military experience spoke louder than pride. Thrain was right. This wasn't a battle they could win, not against adversaries who fought with suicidal ferocity and technology that exceeded estimates by orders of magnitude. "Order a general retreat," Korthax said, each word weighing like lead. "All ships must activate warp drives as soon as they are at a safe distance. Transmit unconditional surrender to the planet." The words were ashes in his mouth, but he spoke them anyway. On Earth, the message of surrender was received with caution. Ambassador Hayes met again with the Emergency Council, this time with military representatives present. General Reeves argued for total pursuit and complete destruction of the alien fleet while they were vulnerable. Hayes disagreed. "We are defenders, not conquerors," she insisted. "They are retreating. Let them go, but make it clear that any return will be met with immediate lethal force." "And the prisoners?" asked the Chinese ambassador. "Several damaged ships won't be able to escape. We have an obligation under war protocols." Hayes nodded. "Recover survivors, but keep them in total containment. We need to understand who they are, where they come from, and how many more there are." What remained of the Vexari fleet began escape sequences, warp drives distorting space-time as desperate ships fled into the depths of the galaxy. Korthax watched the blue planet disappear from his screens with a mixture of relief and deep humiliation. He had catastrophically underestimated the humans. He had treated them as primitives when they were, in fact, predators who had spent their entire existence perfecting ways to kill each other. And when they finally received an external enemy, they applied 10,000 years of experience in warfare with terrifying efficiency. Remaining flagships were 141 out of the original 203. More than 70,000 Vexari soldiers dead. The greatest military defeat in modern Imperial history. And all for underestimating fragile creatures without claws or natural armor. In Earth's orbit, rescue and salvage teams began working on the alien ships too damaged to flee. Combat-trained astronauts cautiously approached drifting destroyers, prepared for resistance. What they found were shocked and wounded survivors, aliens who looked at their human captors with a mixture of fear and reluctant respect. Grand Admiral Korthax was recovered 3 hours after the official end of the battle, found in an escape pod after the Hammer of Order suffered catastrophic damage to its warp drive. Elite soldiers from the United States Space Marine Corps escorted him to a containment facility built in record time. When brought before Ambassador Hayes via a secure video link, Korthax found himself looking at a human woman of average height, gray hair, and eyes that had seen much in a long life. She didn't look triumphant, just tired. "Admiral Korthax," Hayes said through automatic translators, "you and your survivors will be treated according to human conventions of war. You will receive medical care, proper food, and protection from reprisals. In exchange, we expect full cooperation in providing us with information about your empire and potential threats." Korthax bowed his head, in a gesture of acceptance. His ancestors would say he had dishonored his lineage, but part of him, the part that had survived decades of war, respected the humans for their victory. They had fought like true warriors. "One question, if I may," Korthax said. "How did you develop such advanced technology without ever leaving your solar system? Our reports indicated a pre-stellar level civilization." Hayes allowed herself a small, sad smile. "Admiral, for millennia, the only thing humans have done consistently is fight each other, and each war taught us lessons on how to kill more efficiently. When you arrived, we simply applied 10,000 years of knowledge in organized violence. You didn't face primitives, you faced specialists." Korthax then understood the terrible truth. Humans were apex predators who had hunted themselves until they perfectly mastered the art of destruction, and he had given them an external target. May the gods have mercy on the galaxy if the humans decide to expand beyond their home world, Korthax muttered to himself. But the gods, if they existed, weren't listening. 3 weeks after the battle that would be known as First Contact, humanity found itself facing a completely new problem. What to do with advanced alien technology scattered throughout the solar system? In the underground hangars of Edwards Air Force Base in California, Dr. Sarah Miller watched the structure of a partially dismantled Vexarii warp drive. The aerospace engineer had spent 20 years designing experimental propulsion systems, but nothing in her education had prepared her for this. The engine was roughly the size of a school bus, but sensors indicated its actual mass was only a fraction of what was expected. Exotic materials that defied Earth's understanding of materials physics. Containment fields that manipulated gravity in ways that would make Einstein roll in his grave. And yet, it was understandable. Complex, alien, but following universal physical principles. "This is incredible," Sarah whispered, tracing gloved fingers over control panels that pulsed with soft light even when disconnected from any apparent power source. "They don't violate fundamental physics. They just found solutions we never considered." Beside her, Dr. Kevin Taylor, a theoretical physicist and part of the International Analysis Team, agreed enthusiastically. "The spatial manipulation fields are based on math I developed in my doctoral thesis 10 years ago. At the time, it was considered purely theoretical. They made it a reality. The global scientific collaboration that emerged after First Contact was unprecedented. Russian physicists worked side by side with American engineers. Indian mathematicians collaborated with Chinese materials specialists. Barriers of national secrecy that had existed for generations evaporated before the undeniable reality. Humanity needed to upgrade technologically, and fast. General Reeves entered the hangar accompanied by Ambassador Hayes. The two had formed an effective partnership over the last few weeks, balancing military needs with diplomatic considerations. Reeves wanted better weaponry. Hayes wanted guarantees that those weapons would never be used against other humans. "Report," Reeves requested, approaching the engineering team. Sarah stepped away from the alien engine and activated a holographic presentation showing detailed technical schematics. "We've managed to map approximately 60% of the warp drive systems. The technology is surprisingly elegant. They use gravitational field manipulation to compress space-time in front of the ship and expand it behind, creating a bubble that technically doesn't violate the speed of light because the ship isn't moving faster than light within its own frame of reference." "How long until we can build one?" Reeves asked directly. Sarah exchanged looks with Kevin before answering. "With unlimited resources and total global cooperation, maybe 18 months for a functional prototype. But there are problems. The necessary materials include elements that don't exist naturally on Earth. We would need to mine them from asteroids or the moon." Hayes intervened. "And what about the Vexarii prisoners? Have they been cooperative?" "Surprisingly, yes," Sarah replied. "Especially Admiral Korthax. He provided access to complete technical libraries. He said it's useless to keep secrets from a species that has already demonstrated effective reverse engineering capabilities." Reeves frowned. "That worries me. Why would he be so cooperative? What's his angle?" The answer came from Korthax himself, who had requested a meeting with human leadership. He was escorted into a specially adapted conference room, his larger dimensions accommodated in a reinforced chair. Even as a prisoner, the Grand Admiral maintained a dignified posture. "You ask why I cooperate," Korthax said through the universal translator that human technicians had adapted from Vexarii technology. "The answer is simple: pragmatism and survival. The empire I served will not accept my defeat. They will return in greater numbers and with adapted strategies. When that happens, My only hope for survival is that you humans are prepared to defeat them again. And for that, you need the technology I possess." Hayes studied the alien carefully. "You're saying the Empire will send another fleet?" Korthax made a sound the translator interpreted as a bitter laugh. "Ambassador, the Empire rules 200 star systems. My fleet of 200 ships was considered small by Imperial standards. When news of this defeat reaches the Imperial capital, the Emperor will send a punitive force of at least 1,000 ships. Not to conquer you, but to make an example. Worlds that resist must be annihilated as a warning to others." The silence that followed was heavy. Reeves was the first to speak. "How much time do we have?" Korthax calculated mentally. "Interstellar communication travels at the speed of light. My last automatic transmission was sent just before the battle. It will take approximately 14 of your months to reach the Imperial capital world. Another 6 months for the Emperor to organize a punitive fleet. Add 4 months of travel at standard warp speed. You have approximately 2 Earth years before the second wave arrives. 2 years to go from a planetary civilization to an interstellar power capable of facing 1,000 warships." The magnitude of the task was overwhelming, but Hayes didn't let despair show on her face. "Admiral Korthax, if you help us prepare, we will guarantee your protection and eventual freedom when this is over. You have my word." Korthax bowed his head in acceptance. "I have one additional condition. When you build your first interstellar ships, I want to serve as a tactical advisor. I know Imperial strategies, battle formations, weaknesses that can be exploited. In exchange, I ask only that when you defeat the Empire, you remember that some Vexari chose to be on the right side of history." "We have a deal," Hayes said, extending her hand in a human gesture of a handshake. Korthax studied the hand for a moment before wrapping his own fingers around it carefully, conscious of his superior strength. The pact was sealed. In the following months, Earth transformed into a cauldron of accelerated innovation. Orbital shipyards were built in record time, massive structures floating between Earth and the Moon. Mining missions were launched to asteroids rich in the exotic materials needed for warp drive construction. The global economy reorganized around a single goal: the survival of the species. Factories that produced consumer electronics were converted to manufacture spacecraft components. Universities around the world launched emergency programs to train a new generation of space engineers. And at the center of it all, classified projects came to life. At the Luna 1 orbital shipyard, the keel of the first human interstellar cruiser was laid in a ceremony watched by billions via global broadcast. The name had already been chosen by public vote: Defiance. A fitting name for the first ship that would take humanity beyond its home cradle as an equal, not a humble explorer. Sarah Miller became the chief engineer of the Defiance project, leading a team of thousands. The specifications were ambitious: 1,300 feet long, capable of carrying 3,000 crew members, armed with the best that human and Vexari technology could offer. Plasma cannons adapted from alien designs, but optimized with superior Earth metallurgy. Gravitational field shields powered by fusion reactors that human scientists had finally mastered. And most importantly, a warp drive capable of crossing light years in days instead of months. Kevin Taylor worked on a parallel project just as ambitious: an interstellar range detection network. Satellites positioned in the Oort cloud, equipped with gravitational sensors capable of detecting warp distortions at distances of several light years. Never again would humanity be caught by surprise. But while engineers and scientists worked on technology, others prepared in different ways. In expanded military training facilities around the world, volunteers from all nations were trained to serve aboard the new starships. Colonel David Chen, hero of the Battle of First Contact, became the chief instructor for the United Earth Space Marine Corps. His students learned not just space combat, but also basic diplomacy, first contact protocols with alien species, and survival in hostile environments. Because when the Defiance and its sister ships were launched, they wouldn't just defend Earth. They would explore, make contact, and perhaps find allies. Korthax watched it all with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. In his comfortable but secure cell, he had access to news feeds and technical reports. He saw a species that, 6 months ago, had barely left its own planet, now building an interstellar fleet with a speed that defied belief. Humans weren't just fast at war. They were fast at everything, driven by existential urgency and a seemingly limitless capacity for cooperation when facing an external threat. He recorded a message for Hayes, requesting a meeting. When she arrived, Korthax went straight to the point. "Ambassador, you are moving too fast. Haste will lead to mistakes, to system failures that will cost lives." Hayes smiled tiredly. "Admiral, we appreciate your concern, but humans have a trait that perhaps you still haven't fully understood. When we say something is impossible, it usually just means we haven't tried with enough determination yet. We have 2 years. We will make it work." Korthax then realized another truth about humans. They were optimistic to the point of madness. But it was that same madness that made them so dangerous. 12 months after first contact, the Defiance was launched on its maiden flight. Sarah Miller was on the bridge as chief engineer, alongside Captain James Morrison, a Navy veteran who had been chosen to command humanity's first starship. "Warp drive is online," the engineering officer reported. "All systems within normal parameters." Morrison looked at Sarah, who nodded in confirmation. He took a deep breath and gave the order that would change human history forever. "Activate warp drive. Destination: Alpha Centauri system. Let's show the galaxy that Earth is no longer alone." The Defiance distorted space-time around it and disappeared in a flash of light, leaving only a trail of Cherenkov radiation. Humanity had taken its first true step toward the stars. And in the depths of space, the Empire waited, preparing to crush these arrogant primitives who dared to challenge the established order. The second battle was coming. The bridge of the Defiance hummed with controlled activity as the ship emerged from a warp jump in the Alpha Centauri system. Captain Morrison watched the main screens showing 3 stars orbiting each other in a complex cosmic dance. Alpha Centauri A and B, yellow giants similar to the Sun, with Proxima Centauri, a red dwarf, completing the stellar trio. "Long-range sensors active," reported the science officer, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park. "Checking for the presence of artificial signals or technological activity." Morrison allowed himself a moment of silent admiration. 4.37 light-years from Earth, and the trip had taken only 6 days. Technology that, a year ago, existed only in the dreams of science fiction authors. "Captain, we have something," Park announced suddenly, her voice thick with excitement. "Multiple sources of electromagnetic emission orbiting Proxima Centauri B, patterns consistent with industrial activity. Sir, there is a civilization here." The bridge fell silent for a heartbeat, before exploding into excited murmurs. Morrison raised a hand for silence. "Transmit the standard first contact greeting on all frequencies. Protocols established by Ambassador Hayes. And keep shields active and weapons ready but not charged. We are explorers, not conquerors." The message was transmitted in hundreds of Earth languages along with universal mathematical sequences and images showing Earth, humanity, and peaceful intentions. Then came the long minutes of waiting as signals traveled at the speed of light. The response arrived 17 minutes later in the form of a video transmission that made Morrison lean forward in his chair. The creature on the screen was humanoid, but definitely alien. Pale bluish skin, 3 eyes arranged in a facial triangle, and a delicate body structure suggesting lower gravity than Earth's. Elaborate clothing suggesting an advanced culture. The universal translator, adapted from Vexari technology, worked for seconds before producing understandable audio. Visitors from the Star Soul, I am Counselor Zephyra of the Proxima Coalition. We have detected your arrival and recognize your signs of peace. However, I must ask, how did a species so recently discovered obtain interstellar travel technology? And why did you choose our system as your first destination? Morrison took a deep breath. This was the crucial moment. Counselor Zephyra, I am Captain James Morrison of the Defiance, the first interstellar ship of United Earth. We obtained warp technology through reverse engineering ships belonging to the Vexari Empire, which attempted to conquer our world 13 months ago. We came to your system because we wanted to find neighbors who could become allies, not threats. The silence that followed was long enough for Morrison to worry if he had made a diplomatic error. Then Zephyra responded, and there was something in her expression that the translator interpreted as shock, mixed with cautious respect. You defeated a Vexari fleet alone? Captain? Morrison. The Proxima Coalition escaped enslavement by the Empire only 2 generations ago, and we only succeeded through an alliance with 3 other species and a scorched earth tactic that destroyed half of our colonial worlds. A single species defeating the Vexari is unprecedented. Morrison felt an inappropriate but genuine pride. It wasn't easy, and we lost many lives, but humans have a certain stubbornness when it comes to defending our home. Counselor, we come in peace, but we also come with a warning. The Empire will return in greater force. When that happens, we would like to count on allies. Zephyra considered for a moment before nodding. Captain Morrison, the Coalition will grant permission for your ship to dock at Station Haven, our main spaceport. We need to discuss this in detail. And also, I confess, we are curious about a species capable of such a military feat. In the following weeks, the Defiance became a bridge between 2 worlds. Human crew members interacted with members of the Proxima Coalition, an alliance of 4 species that had united against Vexari domination. Besides the blue-skinned Proximans, there were the Kresh, insectoid creatures of superior logical reasoning, the Velm, telepathic amphibians with a collective intelligence, and the Construct, beings of pure energy inhabiting mechanical bodies. Sarah Miller, who had accompanied the maiden voyage as a technical consultant, found herself in fascinating discussions with Kresh engineers about optimizing warp drives. The Kresh, she discovered, thought in terms of pure mathematical efficiency, while humans tended toward creative solutions that worked even without a full understanding of why. A Kresh engineer named Clicktor, whose real name was a series of clicks the translator phonetically approximated, watched Sarah work with something similar to admiration. Your approach is chaotic, Clicktor observed through the translator, but effective. You modify parameters based on intuition, not calculation. How is this possible? Sarah laughed. Humans call it empirical engineering. We try something, see if it works, and make adjustments until it works better. It's not elegant, but it's fast. The Kresh would value your methodology, Clicktor said thoughtfully, especially in emergency situations where there is no time for full analysis. Meanwhile, in a diplomatic conference room at Station Haven, Ambassador Hayes, who had arrived on a supply ship 3 weeks after the Defiance, negotiated the terms of a formal alliance between Earth and the Proxima Coalition. Counselor Zephyra presented a carefully structured proposal. The Coalition will offer access to our trade and information networks, technology sharing in areas where we are advanced, and logistical support for defense operations. In exchange, we ask for access to your military techniques and tactics that proved effective against the Vexarii. Hayes studied the terms projected in holography. It was a fair deal, but there were complications. Counselor, I appreciate the generosity. However, I must be frank. Many of our military tactics were developed through millennia of internal conflict. They are effective because humans are exceptionally good at killing other humans. I'm not sure we want to spread that knowledge across the galaxy. Zephyra bowed her head in understanding. Your honesty is refreshing, Ambassador. But consider, the Empire will show no such restraint. If we do not prepare adequately, all our civilizations will fall. I would rather risk dangerous knowledge than die ignorant. Hayes recognized the wisdom in those words. Very well, but with one condition. Any shared military technology can only be used defensively, never for aggression against peaceful species. I agree to your terms, Zephyra said, and I have information that may interest you. We have intelligence on Imperial movements. The Empire is indeed gathering a punitive fleet, but there is internal division. Some Imperial lords question the wisdom of attacking a species that proved to be so formidable. Others demand total annihilation as an example. How much time do we have? Hayes asked directly. Zephyra accessed the data on her device. Our estimates suggest approximately 8 Earth months until the arrival of the Second Fleet. There will be at least 1,000 ships, possibly more. They are commanded by Warlord Vrakesh, a man known for total extermination tactics. Hayes felt the crushing weight of responsibility. We need more ships, more allies, more time. There is a possibility, Zephyra said hesitantly. The Neutral Galactic Council. It is an organization of species that maintain strict neutrality but mediate conflicts. If we could present our case before them, perhaps they could intervene diplomatically, buying us valuable time. Hayes clung to that hope. How do we make contact? The meeting stretched on for hours, planning a strategy that combined military preparation with diplomatic maneuvering. When it finally ended, Hayes felt simultaneously hopeful and terrified by the sheer magnitude of the task ahead. Back on Earth, ship production was accelerating. The Defiance now had 5 sisters, the Resolute, the Indomitable, the Tenacious, the Relentless, and the Dauntless. Each name was chosen to reflect the human determination to never surrender. But 6 ships, even equipped with the best technology available, would not be enough against 1,000. Korthax, still a cooperative prisoner but now more of an advisor than an enemy, reviewed battle plans with General Jack Reeves. The Vexari veteran traced tactical diagrams in holography, showing standard Imperial formations. The Vexari fight with a doctrine of crushing through numerical superiority, Korthax explained. They are not tactically creative. They rely on protocols established over millennia. This is a weakness that can be exploited. Reeves studied the diagrams. So we need to be unpredictable, use tactics they would never expect. Exactly, Korthax agreed. And I have a suggestion. The Vexari despise traps, viewing them as dishonorable. They believe only cowards would use such methods. This means they are never prepared for them. A slow smile spread across Reeves's face. Admiral Korthax, I think you and I are going to get along just fine. Humans love a good trap. In the following months, the solar system was transformed into an elaborate fortress. Gravity minefields were positioned at strategic points. Satellites disguised as space debris awaited activation. Automated weapon stations were hidden within the asteroid belt. And 6 human warships trained incessantly, executing coordinated maneuvers that would make any conventional fleet look slow and predictable. Colonel David Chen, now commander of the Unified Earth Fighter Wing, led combat exercises that pushed pilots to their absolute limits. He knew that when the battle came, every second of hesitation would cost lives. In a final meeting before the estimated arrival of the Imperial fleet, Hayes gathered all the leaders, both humans and alien allies. The room was packed. Representatives from the Proxima, Coalition, military advisors, scientists, and diplomats. We know what's coming, Hayes said without preamble. 1,000 ships against our 6. Mathematically, it's impossible, but humans have a history of doing the impossible, and this time, we aren't fighting alone. Counselor Zephyra stood up. The Coalition will send 15 warships to assist in the defense. It isn't much, but it is everything we can mobilize without leaving our own worlds vulnerable. 21 ships against 1,000. The odds had improved marginally, but they were still dire. Korthax also stood, surprising many in attendance. Ambassador Hayes, if I may, I would like, to make a formal offer. There are other Vexari like me, those who question the morality of the Empire. If we can make contact, perhaps we can cause dissension within the enemy ranks. Hayes considered it. It's risky. They could simply use any communication to track our positions. Korthax nodded. True. But if it works, we could reduce the enemy force significantly before the first salvo is even fired. The decision was made. They would try everything: military force, diplomacy, subterfuge, and internal betrayal, because when the Empire arrived, there would be no second chance. And in the depths of interstellar space, the Imperial fleet advanced inexorably. Warlord Vrakesh watched the sun grow in his viewfinders with sadistic anticipation. Soon, these primitive humans would learn the cost of defying the Empire. But Vrakesh didn't know that humans had already paid in blood to learn a different lesson. Never underestimate a cornered predator defending its home. The alerts began to sound simultaneously at every monitoring station in the solar system. Dr. Maya Patel, now director of the Interstellar Detection System, watched the readings with a tight stomach but steady hands. 16 months of preparation were about to face the ultimate test. Confirmed, she announced over a global communication channel. 1,143 warp signatures detected entering the heliopause. Standard Imperial wedge formation. Distance, 5 billion miles and closing. Estimated time until weapons range, 4 Earth hours. On the bridge of the Defiance, now the flagship of the small Earth fleet, Captain James Morrison keyed the comms to all Allied ships. Protocol Delta is active. All units assume designated positions. Remember, this isn't about winning through brute force. This is about making them bleed for every inch of space. The 6 Earth ships dispersed in a formation that seemed random, but was carefully calculated. 15 Proxima Coalition ships positioned themselves at strategic points around the system, and hidden throughout the surrounding space, hundreds of automated traps waited patiently. Aboard the Imperial flagship Hammer of Judgment, Warlord Vrakesh watched the solar system with thinly veiled contempt. He was larger than Korthax, his dark carapace covered in ritual battle scars. Where Korthax had been a calculating strategist, Vrakesh was a warmonger who believed in absolute brute force. Only 21 ships, Vrakesh said with a guttural laugh. Korthax was pathetic. He lost to this. Comms officer, transmit the standard ultimatum, but reduce the surrender time to 5 minutes. They don't deserve more than that. The message was broadcast: immediate surrender or total annihilation. This time, there would be no negotiation. At Unified Earth Command, Ambassador Hayes watched the tactical feeds alongside General Reeves and Korthax. The former Vexari admiral studied the enemy formation with experienced eyes. Vrakesh is arrogant, Korthax observed. See how he keeps the capital ships at the center of the formation, protected by layers of escorts. He expects us to attack head-on, wasting resources against overlapping shields. Then we'll give him exactly the opposite, Reeves said with a predatory grin. Activate Phase 1. What happened next caught the Vexari completely by surprise. Instead of responding to the ultimatum or taking obvious defensive positions, the Earth and Allied ships simply disappeared. Not by fleeing, but by diving into gravity interference fields that made sensor detection nearly impossible. It was technology humans had adapted from black hole studies, something the Vexari had never seen applied tactically. Where did they go? Vrakesh roared. Find them! Before his officers could respond, the first wave of traps activated. Gravity mines that had waited inert suddenly pulsed with life, creating artificial gravity wells that pulled. Vexari escort ships out of their formations. Confusion spread as captains tried to compensate for the unexpected forces, and then the minefields began to explode. They weren't conventional explosives. They were antimatter devices, small but devastating. Each detonation generated a flash of energy that overloaded shields and blinded sensors for precious seconds. Dozens of ships were damaged, some critically. Countermeasures, Rakesh ordered furiously. Destroy those mines. But while the Vexari focused on neutralizing the minefields, the real threat revealed itself. From the asteroid belt, where they had hidden among the space rocks, automated weapons stations opened fire. Long-range railguns launched, projectiles at significant fractions of the speed of light. High-energy lasers sliced through space. And the 21 Allied ships emerged from hiding not where Vrakesh expected, but on the flanks and rear of the Imperial formation, striking weak points with surgical precision. The battle that followed was chaotic, but orchestrated. Humans and their allies didn't try to win through direct confrontation. Instead, they executed hit-and-run tactics, coordinated strikes followed by rapid retreats to new hiding positions. Commander Chen led fighter squadrons in suicide-style dives through the enemy formation, leaving a trail of fusion torpedoes before escaping through interference fields. Kresh, pilots from the coalition executed impossible flanking maneuvers, their naturally superior reflexes allowing for evasions that would make humans black out from G-forces. Each attack cost the Imperial fleet ships, not many at once, but constantly, a bleeding that wouldn't stop. Rakesh watched his forces being slowly fragmented and felt something unfamiliar: uncertainty. This wasn't how battles were supposed to be. Where was the honorable confrontation? Where was the opportunity to demonstrate superiority through firepower? Reform into a defensive sphere, he ordered. Bring all ships close. Create an overlapping field of fire that nothing can penetrate. It was exactly what Reeves expected him to do. Phase 2, the general ordered. Activate the constrictors. Hidden in the space around the now compacted Imperial formation, special devices began to function. Gravity field generators created a zone of spatial distortion around the Vexari fleet. It wasn't strong enough to cause direct damage, but it was enough to interfere with warp drives and long-range communication systems. The Vexari were trapped, at least temporarily, and that was when the true trap snapped shut. From the depths of the outer solar system, where it had been hidden beyond sensor range, came the final contribution from the Proxima Coalition. It wasn't a warship. It was something humans would recognize as a massive carrier, but it carried a very special cargo. Millions of combat drones, each smaller than a human fighter but armed and controlled by construct artificial intelligences. The swarm was a tactic the Coalition had developed specifically against Vexari numerical superiority. The drones flooded the Imperial formation like a plague of metallic insects, individually fragile, but in numbers sufficient to completely overwhelm point defense systems. Every drone destroyed cost ammunition and energy that the Vexari could not easily replace. Vrakesh finally understood the full extent of the trap. These enemies didn't fight with honor. They fought to win, using every advantage, every trick, and every dishonorable tactic they could conceive. And it was working. 100 Imperial ships had been destroyed or critically damaged. Another 200 were compromised by damaged systems. And worst of all, morale was crumbling. Vexari captains, accustomed to easy dominance, found themselves lost against adversaries who refused to fight predictably. That was when Korthax made his move. Through an encrypted communication channel he had established weeks earlier, he transmitted a message to subordinates he knew personally, officers who had served under his command and who respected his judgment more than Imperial dogma. Brothers and sisters in battle, this war is a mistake. The humans are not weak. They are predators who showed us mercy after defeating us. Vrakesh leads us to annihilation out of pride. Those who value life more than empty honor, break formation now. Be remembered as wise survivors, not foolish martyrs. The message caused a riot within the Imperial ranks. 47 captains, faced with the reality of a lost battle and the temptation of survival, made an unprecedented decision. Their ships broke formation and began escape sequences. "Traitors!" Vrakesh roared. "Destroy them!" But opening fire on their own created even more confusion. Other ships, seeing the desertion and fratricide, also began to question. The Imperial formation disintegrated not through physical destruction, but through the collapse of morale and discipline. Morrison watched the development through the sensors and felt a mixture of relief and sadness. They were winning, but a cost was being paid. 5 Earth fighters destroyed. The Tenacious severely damaged. 3 coalition ships lost entirely, lives that would weigh on his conscience. But there was no time for mourning yet. "All units," Morrison ordered, "advance for the final confrontation. Target, the enemy flagship. Let's end this." The Allied forces coordinated a final assault. It was no longer about tactics or strategy, but about applying maximum force at a single point. 20 ships against the Hammer of Judgment and its remaining escort. What followed was the most intense minute of the battle. Shields failed under the coordinated bombardment. Armor cracked, critical systems exploded. And finally, the Hammer of Judgment, the pride of the Imperial fleet, sat adrift in space, its engines dead and its fighting capacity eliminated. Vrakesh, wounded but alive, watched through a shattered viewfinder as human troops boarded his ship. He expected a summary execution. Instead, he found himself face to face with Morrison, who offered a hand to help him up. "Warlord Vrakesh," Morrison said through a translator, "I declare you and your crew prisoners of war. You will receive medical treatment and respect according to the protocols we have established. The war is over." Vrakesh looked at the extended hand as if it were an alien concept. Eventually, he accepted the help, standing up with wounded but intact dignity. "Why don't you kill us?" he asked. "We have done the same to countless species." Morrison considered it. "Because humans learned a hard lesson through our own wars. Perpetual revenge only breeds more war. We're breaking that cycle. Today." As the prisoners were processed and Allied ships began rescue operations, a message was sent across the galaxy. Not by humans, but by the Neutral Galactic Council, which had observed the battle through probes. The message was simple but revolutionary. A new power had emerged on the galactic stage. Earth and its allies were no longer marginal species to be ignored. They were a force to be reckoned with. At the Vexari Imperial Center, 200 light-years away, the Emperor received news of the second defeat with calculated silence. 2 fleets destroyed, hundreds of ships lost, and worse, an example of successful resistance that would inspire other subjugated worlds. The Empire faced a choice: escalate to a total war of extermination, or accept a new reality where they were not invincible. The decision would change the galaxy forever. 6 months after the Second Battle of Earth, as historians were already calling it, the solar system had transformed into something unimaginable years before. It was not just a fortress, but a diplomatic meeting point. Ships from dozens of different species orbited Earth, some bringing ambassadors, others carrying trade, and some simply moved by curiosity about the humans who had defeated the Empire twice. At the newly built Unity diplomatic station, positioned at a Lagrange point between Earth and the Moon, Ambassador Hayes presided over a historic session. Around a circular table designed to accommodate diverse anatomies sat representatives from 23 different civilizations. The order of the day was unique. The formalization of the Mutual Defense Alliance, a coalition rising from the ashes of the conflict with the Vexari. It would not be an empire or a federation, but a voluntary union of worlds committed to a simple principle. Aggression against one would be considered aggression against all. Counselor Zephyra of the Proxima Coalition, was the first to speak. 2 years ago, my people lived in constant fear of an Imperial return. Today, for the first time in generations, we look at the stars and see not a threat, but a possibility. This is the gift humanity has given us: hope. Clicktor, the Kresh representative, agreed with a series of clicks translated as an enthusiastic affirmation. Logic would dictate that a recently emerged species would be inexperienced and ineffective. Humans proved that logic does not fully capture reality. Their tactical capabilities and ingenuity compensated for technological deficits. More importantly, they showed that the Empire can be defeated. But it wasn't all celebration. Ambassador Thorian of the Velm, telepathic amphibians, expressed concerns that many shared. Humans are effective in war, that is undeniable. But I must ask, what kind of allies will you be in peace? Your history is stained with internal conflict. How do you guarantee you won't become the threat you replace? Hayes did not flinch from Thorian's telepathic gaze. It's a fair question, and one we ask ourselves constantly. I cannot guarantee perfection. Humans are fallible, capable of great violence as well as great compassion. But I can offer this. Our system of government is based on mutual accountability, a balance of power, and the capacity to change when we are wrong. And after facing an external existential threat, we finally understand the real cost of internal division. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. Our planet was once home to hundreds of nations competing for limited resources. Now we understand that we are one species, one world, part of a larger galactic community. We won't be perfect, but we will be committed partners. The vote was unanimous. The Mutual Defense Alliance was formed. But while diplomats celebrated, another meeting was taking place in a more austere location. In the high-security detention facilities on a separate orbital station, 3 figures met in a conference room: Korthax, Vrakesh, and an unexpected mediator, General Reeves. Vrakesh, still recovering from his injuries but clearly healing, looked at Korthax with a complex expression that the translator interpreted as a mix of anger and reluctant respect. "You betrayed the Empire," Vrakesh said. "You encouraged desertion in the ranks. According to Imperial law, you deserve execution." Korthax maintained a calm posture. "I saved lives, Vrakesh, including yours. If we had continued fighting, the entire fleet would have been annihilated. Humans showed mercy when they could have chosen extermination. Doesn't that tell you something about their character?" Reeves intervened before the discussion could escalate. "Gentlemen, I didn't bring you here to relitigate the past. I have a proposal. The Empire will face a choice in the coming months: accept a new reality or escalate to total war. You two, as the highest-ranking prisoners, have potential influence over that decision." Vrakesh laughed bitterly. "You expect us to convince the Emperor to accept defeat. He would rather die." "Perhaps," Reeves agreed. "But there are factions within the Empire that are not monolithic. Korthax has informed us about lords who question the costs of constant expansion, aristocrats who value stability over conquest. If we could reach them, offer an alternative to perpetual war, perhaps there is a path to genuine peace." Korthax leaned forward. "I have contacts who would consider this. But they would need guarantees. Humans will not seek revenge against Imperial civilian worlds. There will be no retaliatory invasion." Reeves nodded firmly. "Earth is not a conqueror, but we won't be victims either. The proposal is simple. The Empire withdraws completely from contested systems, recognizes the independence of worlds seeking liberation, and establishes mutually respected borders. In exchange, we offer trade, cultural exchange, and eventually, perhaps, friendship." Vrakesh processed this for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. This would only work if the Emperor could preserve his dignity. He will not accept terms that look like unconditional surrender. Then we'll call it a strategic reformulation, Reeves suggested with a half-smile. The Empire chooses to focus on consolidation and internal development instead of aggressive expansion. It's not a defeat. It's an evolution. The three continued negotiating for hours, shaping a proposal that would be transmitted through secret diplomatic channels. It was an ambitious plan, possibly naive, but it represented the hope of ending a cycle of violence without the need for a war of extermination. Meanwhile, in Earth's expanded orbital shipyards, a new generation of ships was being built. Not just for war, but for exploration, trade, and diplomacy. Humanity was finally taking its place among the stars, not as a conqueror, but as an equal participant. Sarah Chen oversaw the construction of the Horizons, the first, purely scientific research ship designed for long-term expeditions. It was equipped with advanced laboratories, life support systems for multiple species, and a state-of-the-art warp drive capable of reaching speeds that would make the first generation of ships look primitive. Beside her, Yuki Tanaka reviewed planned mission schedules. We have requests from 3 allied civilizations for joint expeditions. The Kresh want to explore a nebula on the edge of the galaxy. The Proximans propose a study of a black hole in a binary system. And there's a fascinating proposal from the Constructs to investigate artifacts from an ancient civilization. Sarah smiled. The exhaustion of years of intense work finally giving way to genuine excitement. We can finally do what humans have always wanted, explore. Not to conquer, but to learn. On Earth's surface, the changes were equally dramatic. Technologies developed for war were being adapted for peaceful purposes. Fusion reactors that once powered plasma cannons now provided clean, abundant energy for cities. Advanced propulsion systems were revolutionizing travel within the solar system, making the colonization of Mars and the moons of Jupiter not just viable, but practical. But perhaps the most profound change was cultural. For the first time in recorded history, humanity was genuinely unified, not through conquest or coercion, but through a shared recognition of belonging to something greater. Maya Patel, now director of the newly formed Institute of Xenological Studies, gave a lecture to a packed auditorium of students. When I detected that first Vexari fleet, I thought I was witnessing the end of humanity. Instead, I witnessed our true beginning, not as an isolated species, but as galactic citizens. A student raised their hand. Dr. Patel, do you think there will be more wars? Maya considered it honestly. Probably. The universe is vast and contains dangers we haven't yet imagined. But now we know we aren't alone. We have allies, partners, and friends among the stars. And more importantly, we learned that our greatest strength isn't technology or weaponry, but our capacity to unite, adapt, and persist against impossible obstacles. 3 months later, the crucial moment arrived. Through diplomatic channels established with Korthax's help, the Vexari Empire transmitted an official response to the peace proposal. Hayes received the message in private first, reading it twice to ensure she understood correctly. Then she called an emergency meeting of the Leadership Council. The Emperor accepts the terms, she announced, her voice thick with carefully controlled emotion. With minor modifications that we have already reviewed and consider acceptable. There will be a formal ceasefire, followed by full treaty negotiations. Worlds under Imperial control will have the right to self-determination. Borders will be established and respected. Silence fell over the room as the magnitude of the news was absorbed. Then gradually, applause began, growing into a genuine celebration. Reeves shook Hayes' hand firmly. You did it. Diplomacy where military force wouldn't have been enough. Hayes shook her head. We all did it. Humans, allies, even the prisoners who chose peace over pride. This is everyone's victory. The formalization of the treaty took place 6 months later in a ceremony broadcast across hundreds of worlds. At Unity Station, expanded to accommodate massive delegations, representatives of the Vexari Empire and the Mutual Defense Alliance signed the document that would alter the course of galactic history. Korthax, released from prison and now serving as an official advisor for Earth-Empire relations, watched with satisfaction. He had risked everything on a bet that humans represented a better future than the empire he had served for decades, and he had been proven right. Vrakesh, also released but choosing to remain on Earth as a cultural observer, admitted reluctantly to Morrison, "Your species is unsettling. You make the impossible look routine." Morrison laughed. "Admiral, unsettling is our specialty. But we're learning to be unsettling in constructive ways." In the following year, the Horizons launched on its maiden voyage, carrying a mixed crew of humans and 4 allied species on a 5-year expedition to explore an uncharted region of the galaxy. Other exploration ships followed, each representing a step beyond known frontiers. Human colonies began to flourish on Mars, Titan, and Europa, but also on exoplanets offered by allies, worlds where humans lived side by side with species that, just a few years earlier, they didn't even know existed. And everywhere they went, humans brought something unique, a resilience born from millennia of adversity, a creativity forged in necessity, and an empathy learned through the terrible cost of hatred. 5 years after first contact, Hayes retired from active diplomatic service. In her farewell speech, she reflected on the extraordinary journey. "When that first fleet arrived, we thought we were facing the end. Instead, we discovered the beginning. We proved that humanity is not defined by technology or military power, but by our stubborn refusal to give up, our capacity to unite when it matters, and our willingness to extend a hand in friendship even to former enemies. The stars are no longer scary unknowns. They are a home we share with countless other lives, and together we will build a future worthy of all of us." In the audience, human and alien faces alike cheered, because that future was already being built, one day at a time. Korthax, sitting in the front row, allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had catastrophically underestimated humans when he arrived with intentions of conquest. But that mistake had cost an empire and saved his soul. Because in the end, it wasn't weapons or technology that defeated the empire. It was a simple but revolutionary idea: that cooperation overcomes domination, that diversity strengthens rather than weakens, and that strategic mercy builds more than tactical cruelty destroys. The galaxy had changed, and humans, those predators who spent eons hunting themselves, finally found a better purpose: not to conquer the cosmos, but to join it as partners, explorers, and eventually, friends. In deep space, beyond the reach of any sensor, ancient threats still lurked, and mysteries awaited discovery. Humanity's journey among the stars was just beginning, and challenges would come. But now, finally, humanity would not face the darkness alone. The stars shone with the promise of tomorrows that no one could have imagined when it all began with an alarm sounding in a silent orbital station, and somewhere a child looked up at the night sky and dreamed not of monsters coming from the stars, but of friends not yet known waiting among them. The predator had awakened, and it had chosen to protect rather than destroy, to build rather than conquer, to unite rather than divide. That was the true awakening, and the galaxy would never be the same. If the tenacity of humanity and the journey of the predators who became guardians inspired you, imagine how many other epic stories await among the stars. Every civilization encountered, every alliance forged, and every challenge overcome is just the beginning of a larger saga. Humanity proved that it's not about being the strongest or the oldest, but about having the courage to stand up when knocked down and extending a hand even to those who came as enemies. Subscribe to the channel to follow more Chronicles of the Galactic Frontier, where every story reveals that true strength lies not in weapons, but in the unwavering determination to never give up and always choose hope over despair. The stars are waiting, and humanity is finally ready to claim its place among them.